Adrian's penthouse overlooked the city, a sea of lights stretching endlessly beneath him. Every window reflected the life he had built: power, wealth, success. But inside, the rooms felt empty. The silence pressed against him, louder than any crowd ever could. He sat alone at the long dining table, a perfectly arranged plate of food in front of him, untouched. The chandelier above shimmered, casting a cold light over the polished marble, highlighting the emptiness around him. For 20 years, Adrian had built walls around his heart. Love, he had decided long ago, was dangerous. It brought pain, heartbreak, and regret, and he would never allow it again. A memory flickered across his mind, like a shadow in a dark room. 2 decades ago, he had fallen deeply for someone, a love that felt infinite. But betrayal had shattered him, leaving a wound that refused to heal. Since then, he had poured himself into work, into wealth, into control, but never into a heart that could be broken again. He glanced at his phone. Meetings, emails, and reminders filled the screen. Everything was planned, structured, and perfect. But perfection could not fill the void he felt each night when he returned to silence. No laughter, no warmth, no hand to hold. Just the cold glow of the city and the hum of machines below. That morning, his assistant had resigned unexpectedly, leaving him with the tedious task of hiring a replacement. Adrian didn't want a new assistant, he wanted solitude. But the company's demands left him no choice. A new name had been sent for approval: Lila. When the announcement arrived, Adrian barely glanced at it. A woman, 28, skilled, and energetic. She sounded competent, efficient, and unassuming, just what he needed. But something about the way her file described her made him pause. Observant, empathetic, and intuitive. He frowned. Empathy. He had spent 20 years avoiding it. Why now did it catch his attention? The day Lila arrived, Adrian's office felt different. The air seemed to shift, a quiet tension threading between the walls. She walked in confidently, smiling politely, her eyes bright and curious. She was ordinary in appearance, simple blouse, neat hair, but something about her presence made the room feel warmer, lighter. "Good morning, Mr. Adrian," she said, her voice calm but cheerful. "I'm Lila, your new assistant. I look forward to working with you." Adrian barely nodded, returning a curt greeting. "Good morning." His voice was cold, clipped, a shield he had perfected over decades. He wanted to test her, see if she would notice the cracks in his armor, or if she would be just another employee, polite and distant like everyone else. From the start, Lila seemed different. She observed quietly, noticing small things: the way he rubbed his temple when stressed, the precise way he organized papers, and the faint sadness that lingered in his eyes. Most people didn't notice. Most people never looked past the surface. But she did. And that made Adrian uneasy. Throughout the day, he found himself strangely aware of her presence. She moved with efficiency and grace, helping him with schedules, reminders, and emails. But she also asked questions, not intrusive, just thoughtful, curious. Questions that made him pause and reflect, questions that reminded him of conversations he had stopped having long ago. By evening, Adrian felt a strange tension he hadn't felt in years. He hated it, and yet, he couldn't ignore it. Lila had entered his carefully constructed world and subtly begun to disrupt it. She hadn't touched his heart directly, but she had shown him that perhaps the walls he had built were not as strong as he believed. That night, Adrian stood by the window, watching the city lights flicker like distant stars. He thought about the way she had smiled, the small laugh she had let slip when a schedule glitch occurred, the way she had looked at him, not with fear or judgment, but with quiet understanding. For the first time in 20 years, he wondered if love could exist again. Could he let someone in? Could he trust again? Or would letting his guard down mean repeating the heartbreak he had spent 2 decades avoiding? A soft sigh escaped him. The city below continued its endless rhythm, indifferent to his thoughts. Yet inside Adrian, something had shifted. The walls around his heart felt just slightly weaker. The loneliness that had been his constant companion now carried a whisper of something new, something dangerous, thrilling, and entirely unexpected. And he knew, even as he turned from the window to the empty room, that his life would never be the same once Lila walked in fully. She was ordinary, yes, but perhaps in her ordinary warmth lay the power to change him forever. The next morning, Adrian's office felt colder than usual, even with sunlight streaming through the tall windows. Lila arrived promptly, her steps confident yet gentle. She carried a notebook and a pen, ready to take on the long list of tasks Adrian had prepared. "Good morning, Mr. Adrian," she said, her voice calm but cheerful. Adrian barely glanced up from his papers. "Good morning," he replied, his tone clipped. He didn't like morning greetings. They felt unnecessary. Yet, he couldn't stop noticing the way she moved, graceful, efficient, and purposeful. She wasn't just another employee. There was something different about her. Throughout the day, Lila followed Adrian's schedule precisely, anticipating his needs before he even voiced them. She reminded him of meetings, organized files meticulously, and even handled minor conflicts with a gentle firmness that surprised him. But it wasn't just her efficiency that unsettled Adrian, it was the subtle way she observed him. She noticed the way his fingers tapped nervously when he was deep in thought, the faint crease between his eyebrows when he was stressed, and the quiet sigh he let out when no one was watching. Most people never paid attention to these small details, but she did. And for the first time in 20 years, someone saw the real Adrian. Not the powerful, untouchable billionaire, but the man beneath the surface. During a lunch break, Adrian sat alone in his office, staring at a sandwich he had no appetite for. Lila entered quietly, holding her own lunch. "Mind if I join you?" she asked politely. Adrian hesitated, unused to company in these moments. "You may," he said reluctantly. They ate in silence for a few minutes. Then she spoke, softly, almost cautiously. "You seem very focused, Mr. Adrian. Do you ever get time for yourself?" Adrian frowned, caught off guard by her question. Most people wouldn't dare to ask. "Time for myself," he repeated. "I don't need it. I have work. That's enough." She nodded, not pushing further. But her gentle curiosity lingered in the room, a quiet presence that made him uneasy. For a man who had avoided connection for 20 years, even small attention felt unfamiliar and dangerous. As the week went on, small moments revealed Adrian's vulnerability. One afternoon, Lila accidentally knocked over a stack of papers. Adrian's first instinct was irritation, a flicker of anger. But then he noticed how genuinely apologetic she was, how her warm eyes reflected concern rather than fear. Something about her honesty softened him, made him pause. By the end of the week, Adrian found himself thinking about her, not just as an employee, but as a person. Her laughter, small gestures, and quiet empathy stayed in his mind longer than he wanted. He hated the thought and yet, he couldn't ignore it. One evening, while preparing for a major meeting, Adrian realized Lila had noticed something he had tried to hide, a handwritten note from his past, tucked among his files, a reminder of the heartbreak that had kept him from love. She didn't comment, didn't judge. She simply returned the note to its place, leaving a quiet understanding in the room. Adrian felt a strange mix of relief and fear. Relief that someone had acknowledged his pain without mocking or exploiting it, and fear because he realized he had never let anyone see this side of him. He had spent 2 decades avoiding vulnerability, and now Lila had unknowingly pierced the armor he had built. As he left the office that evening, Adrian stood by the window of his penthouse, staring at the city below. The lights glimmered like distant stars, and for the first time in years, his mind wasn't on schedules, meetings, or business deals. It was on her, the new assistant who seemed ordinary, yet had begun to change everything. A soft sigh escaped him. He hated the way he felt, the subtle warmth that had started creeping into his chest. But he couldn't stop thinking about her smile, her patience, and the way she had simply seen him. The city below remained unaware of the quiet transformation unfolding above its streets. For 20 years, Adrian had avoided love, shutting his heart against pain and connection. But Lila had entered his life like a gentle breeze, slowly, quietly, and irrevocably. And Adrian knew, deep in the corners of his carefully guarded mind, that his life would never be the same once she fully stepped into it. Adrian had spent 20 years building walls around his heart, but Lila's presence was slowly cracking them. He hated how she made him feel, nervous, distracted, even warm. It was unfamiliar, uncomfortable, and yet strangely thrilling. One afternoon, a crisis at the office tested both of them. A major client was threatening to pull out, and Adrian's usual methods of control weren't enough. Frustrated, he slammed a folder onto his desk. "I need this resolved now," he barked, though his voice wavered slightly. Lila stepped forward calmly. "I have an idea," she said, her eyes steady and confident. "If we adjust the proposal this way, the client may reconsider. Let me handle the call with them." Adrian stared at her, a flicker of doubt crossing his face. Normally, he handled crises alone. Trusting someone had never been part of his plan. But something about her tone, her calm determination, made him pause. "Fine," he said reluctantly. "Go ahead." Minutes later, she returned, a small, triumphant smile on her face. They agreed to continue. Problem solved. Adrian felt a mix of relief and something he hadn't felt in years, admiration. He cleared his throat. "I didn't expect that." Lila shrugged lightly. "Sometimes, you have to trust people, even if you don't expect them to succeed." Her words struck him. He realized that trust was a feeling he had avoided, feared, and resisted for 2 decades. And now, here she was, earning his trust effortlessly. Over the next few days, Adrian noticed himself watching her more closely. The way she laughed at small things, the way she paused thoughtfully before speaking, the way she cared for others in the office. These were qualities he had admired from a distance in others before heartbreak, but never allowed himself to feel again. Then came a moment that unsettled him even more. Lila had stayed late to finish an urgent task, and Adrian offered to walk her to the elevator. "Thank you for staying," he said, his voice softer than usual. She smiled, looking directly at him. "I like helping, Mr. Adrian. It's satisfying to see things work out." There was a pause, heavy and electric. For a moment, Adrian's mind blanked. He noticed how her hair fell softly over her shoulders, how her eyes seemed to catch the light differently, and how her presence made the room warmer than any luxury he owned. "Lila," he started, then stopped. His voice caught. He wasn't used to speaking like this, not about feelings, not about people. She tilted her head, waiting patiently, unafraid of the tension. I appreciate your help," he said finally, awkwardly. "More than I should." Her smile widened, but there was no misreading it, she understood. She had seen the man behind the billionaire facade. She had noticed the lonely, guarded man who had spent years avoiding love. And now, he was admitting it, even if only in small, careful steps. The elevator arrived, breaking the moment. Lila stepped inside, looked back, and said softly, "You're braver than you think, Mr. Adrian." Then the doors closed. Adrian stood alone, heart racing. Braver. Him. He had always thought he was safe behind his walls. And yet, in that brief encounter, something had shifted. He realized that the fortress he had built around himself wasn't as strong as he believed. Lila had found a way in, not forcefully, not quickly, but steadily, gently, and with patience. That night, Adrian stood by his penthouse window, looking at the city below. The lights twinkled like stars, and he felt a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. For 20 years, he had avoided love, but now, for the first time, he wondered, could he let someone in again? The boundaries he had set so carefully were starting to crumble. And though he wasn't ready to admit it fully, a small part of him, the part he had kept hidden, was beginning to hope. Lila had come into his life quietly, subtly, and irreversibly. She hadn't demanded his heart, but she had made him question the rules he had lived by for decades. And Adrian knew one thing. His life, as he had known it for 20 years, was about to change. Adrian had never expected to feel this way. Lila's presence lingered in his thoughts long after she left the office. Her laughter, the gentle tilt of her head when she listened, the way she made even the most tedious tasks feel lighter. He couldn't escape it. For 20 years, he had avoided love, avoided vulnerability, and now, he felt a pull he didn't know how to resist. He paced his penthouse that evening, hands clasped behind his back. He hated this feeling. He hated that someone could make him feel uncertain, exposed, and strangely alive all at once. Yet, he couldn't stop thinking about her. The next morning, Lila arrived with her usual bright energy. "Good morning, Mr. Adrian," she said cheerfully. "Good morning," he replied, his voice slightly softer than usual. He noticed the way she smiled at him, completely unaware of the storm she stirred inside him. Over the next few days, Adrian found himself watching her in small moments, when she organized files, helped colleagues, or simply laughed at a minor joke. Each glance, each gesture, tugged at the walls he had built around his heart. And then, a crisis arose. A major client demanded a last-minute presentation. Adrian's team was struggling, and the pressure mounted. He realized he couldn't manage it alone this time. Hesitantly, he turned to Lila. "Lila, I need your help," he said quietly. She looked at him, surprised, but nodded. "Of course, Mr. Adrian. Let's do this together." As they worked side by side, Adrian felt something unfamiliar, a connection. He noticed the way she encouraged him when he doubted himself, how she patiently explained solutions, and how she genuinely cared about the outcome. He wanted to tell her something he had buried for 20 years. Later, as the office emptied, Adrian lingered. Lila was packing her bag, humming softly. He cleared his throat, his heart pounding. "Lila," he began, then stopped. The words felt foreign, heavy, and frightening. I need to say something." She turned to him, curious. "Yes." Adrian's voice faltered. I'm not used to feeling like this. Feeling attached, or caring about someone like I haven't in years." Lila tilted her head, her eyes kind. "That's okay, Mr. Adrian. It's human to feel." He swallowed hard. His chest felt tight. "I don't want to get hurt again. I've avoided love for 20 years because it's dangerous. But I can't stop thinking about you. I don't know what to do." Lila stepped closer, gently. "You're not alone," she said softly. "It's okay to feel. You don't have to face it all by yourself." Her words broke through the walls he had built, layer by layer. For the first time in 2 decades, Adrian felt the fear of love collide with a hope he couldn't ignore. He realized he wanted to try, to risk his heart, to see if happiness was possible after so many years of solitude. The office felt smaller suddenly, warmer. Adrian noticed her smile, her patient gaze, and felt a pull stronger than any command, any deal, or any rule he had followed. He wanted her in his life, not as an assistant, but as someone he could trust, care for, and perhaps love. But fear lingered. What if he failed? What if heartbreak returned? The thought made him flinch, and yet, the idea of denying these feelings felt unbearable. That night, Adrian stood by the window, city lights twinkling below. His penthouse felt less like a fortress and more like a stage for a story he didn't know how to write. Lila had entered his life quietly, but the impact was profound. For the first time in 20 years, he realized that love was not something to avoid. It was something to face, carefully, courageously, and with an open heart. And though he didn't yet know how the story would unfold, Adrian knew one thing with certainty. He couldn't go back to the life he had lived alone. He had felt a connection, fragile but undeniable, and it terrified him. Yet, in that fear, there was also hope. A hope that perhaps, just perhaps, Lila could change everything. The office felt tense that morning. Adrian had barely slept, his mind tangled with thoughts of Lila. He wanted to confess his feelings fully, but fear held him back. He worried about rejection, about repeating the heartbreak he had endured 20 years ago. Lila entered the room, unaware of the storm in his heart. She smiled softly, greeting him as usual. "Good morning, Mr. Adrian," she said, her voice calm, warm, and steady. "Morning," Adrian muttered, avoiding her eyes. He had never felt so conflicted. Every glance, every gesture from her pulled him closer, yet every word reminded him of the walls he had spent decades building. That day, a major project threatened to collapse. A miscommunication with a client caused tension, and the office buzzed with panic. Adrian knew he had to act quickly, but the pressure pushed him to his limits. Lila noticed his distress immediately. She approached quietly. "Mr. Adrian, I can handle the client. Trust me," she said confidently. He hesitated. Trusting someone fully had been nearly impossible for him, yet he nodded reluctantly. "Do it," he said. Minutes later, the situation resolved perfectly. The client agreed to continue, and Adrian's team breathed a sigh of relief. But behind the relief, Adrian felt something he couldn't name: gratitude, admiration, and a strange warmth that spread through him. As the day ended, Adrian tried to focus on work, but his thoughts kept drifting to Lila. He wanted to tell her everything: his fear, his growing feelings, the loneliness that had defined his life, but he couldn't find the courage. Then, a sudden misunderstanding changed everything. A colleague mentioned to Adrian that Lila had received a job offer from another company. The words hit him like a shock. His chest tightened. Panic and jealousy surged in his heart. He confronted Lila privately. "Is this true? Are you leaving?" he asked, his voice strained. Lila looked surprised and hurt. I was offered a position elsewhere, yes, but I haven't decided. I'm loyal to you, Mr. Adrian, to the team. I never mentioned it because I didn't want to cause worry." Adrian's heart ached. His fear of losing her made him act harsher than he intended. "You could leave any time," he said sharply. I can't." His voice faltered. "I can't lose people I care about. Not again." Lila's eyes softened. "Adrian, I'm not leaving unless you truly push me away. But you need to be honest. With me, with yourself." Her words struck him. Honesty. Vulnerability. Two things he had avoided for decades. He realized that if he wanted her in his life, he had to face his fears. That evening, Adrian stood alone in his penthouse, staring at the city lights. He thought about every decision, every wall he had built, every year spent in solitude. And he realized something important: love was not something to fear, it was something worth risking. The next day, he sought Lila out. His heart pounded as he approached her desk. "Lila, I need to tell you something," he said, his voice trembling slightly. She looked up, sensing the seriousness in his tone. "Yes." Adrian took a deep breath. I care about you. More than I have ever allowed myself to care about anyone in 20 years. I've avoided love because of fear, because of heartbreak. But I can't ignore my feelings anymore. I want you in my life. Not just as my assistant, but as someone who means everything to me." Lila's eyes widened, and then a gentle smile spread across her face. "Adrian, I've waited a long time for you to say that. And I care about you too. You just had to let yourself feel it." In that moment, Adrian felt a weight lift from his heart. The walls that had protected him for decades began to crumble completely. He realized that the fear of heartbreak was small compared to the joy of finally opening his heart. The turning point had come, not through words or plans, but through courage, honesty, and the willingness to face the unknown. Adrian and Lila stood together, hearts pounding, on the edge of a new beginning. And for the first time in 20 years, Adrian understood that love wasn't something to avoid. It was something to embrace, fully and bravely. The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of Adrian's office, casting a warm glow across the room. For the first time in 20 years, the light felt comforting rather than empty. Adrian stood by his desk, heart racing, thinking about Lila. The events of the past few days had changed everything. The misunderstanding, the fear of losing her, and the courage to confess had brought them closer. And now, he knew there was no turning back. He didn't want to. Lila entered the office, her usual bright smile lighting up the space. She noticed the nervous tension in Adrian's posture and paused. "Good morning, Mr. Adrian," she said softly. "Good morning," he replied, his voice firmer, more certain than ever before. But the truth was, certainty had little to do with it. His heart was still racing, and he felt exposed, vulnerable, but he also felt alive. As the day went on, small gestures and glances made it clear that their bond had shifted. The subtle touches, shared laughs, and moments of understanding were no longer casual. They were intimate, building a connection that neither could ignore. Later that afternoon, Adrian asked her to stay behind after everyone had left. The office was quiet, filled only with the soft hum of the city outside. He took a deep breath, knowing this was the moment that mattered most. "Lila," he began, his voice steady but gentle, "I want you to know, you've changed my life. I've spent 20 years avoiding love because I was afraid of getting hurt, afraid of trusting anyone again. But you made me realize that love is worth the risk." Her eyes softened, a warm, encouraging look that made him feel both nervous and safe. "I care about you," he continued, taking a small step closer. "I care about you more than I've ever cared about anyone. And I don't want to hide it anymore. I don't want to run from it. I want to try, to love, to trust, and to be with you." Lila's lips curved into a gentle smile. "Adrian, I've been hoping you'd say that. I care about you too. I've seen the real you, the man beneath the walls, and I want to be with that man. I want to face the world with you." In that moment, Adrian felt a rush of relief, joy, and something deeper, peace. The fear that had haunted him for 20 years melted away. He reached for her hand, holding it firmly, feeling the warmth and certainty of her touch. For the first time in 2 decades, he allowed himself to believe in happiness, in love, in connection. The walls that had protected him for so long were gone, replaced by trust, understanding, and the courage to embrace life fully. Days turned into weeks, and Adrian and Lila's relationship blossomed. Workdays were no longer lonely, and the office felt brighter, filled with laughter and warmth. Colleagues noticed the change. The once distant billionaire now smiled genuinely, and the assistant who had always been kind and observant now shared moments of joy openly. Evenings were spent together, sharing stories, dreams, and quiet moments that mattered more than any luxury or success. Adrian learned to open his heart gradually, and Lila showed him that vulnerability was not weakness, it was the foundation for true love. One night, as they stood together on the balcony of his penthouse, overlooking the city lights that had once seemed cold and distant, Adrian whispered softly, "I never thought I'd find this happiness again. But you made it possible." Lila leaned her head on his shoulder, smiling. "We made it possible together," she said. Adrian held her close, feeling a peace he had never known. 20 years of solitude, fear, and avoidance had led him to this single truth. Love, when embraced with courage, could heal even the deepest wounds. And as they stood there, hand in hand, hearts aligned, Adrian knew that life had given him a second chance, a chance to love, to trust, and to be truly happy. For 20 years, he had avoided love. But now, in Lila's presence, he had found it at last.